Hello, it is 6:15 p.m. I see that we have, do we have Dr. Stark with us? And Dr. Weeks?
Dr. Diaz, I'm not seeing Dr. Stark nor Dr. Weeks. Dr. Weeks was on a little bit earlier, though. Do you want to wait to begin until they both come on?
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I don't know where Dr. Weeks is at. Troy or Dr. McLaughlin, do you know where Dr. Weeks is at?
Hello, Dr. Diaz. I believe they are trying to get themselves set up.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm unmuted.
I can hear you, Dr. McLaughlin. I could also hear Kim.
Okay.
I can't hear anybody.
We can hear each other, Dr. Diaz.
We can hear you.
We can hear you too. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I hear from Troy that you guys can hear me. Should I start? I mean, we don't have it doesn't look like we have Dr. Weeks or Dr. Stark.
I would wait.
I don't know what anyone is saying to me.
Okay.
I can't hear anybody. Is it my computer?
I can hear you just fine.
I'm gonna have to log in on a different computer. Okay, Troy, I'm trying to log in with a different computer. I'm gonna leave this meeting.
Troy, Dr. Diaz needs let back into the meeting.
All right, somebody say something.
Hello, Dr. Diaz.
Okay, I can hear now. All right, do we have Dr. Weeks with us and Dr. Stark?
I have some news about Dr. Stark. She's having some technical difficulties.
Okay.
She may show up in the Zoom meeting as Rocky Baroom, and they're switching out her computer right now, but it's under his name.
Okay, sounds good. Do you know if she's okay with us moving forward?
1 second. Yeah, she's okay with the meeting starting. She'll be on in just 1 minute.
Perfect. All right, well, I would like to call this meeting to order at 6:21 p.m. We will now have Dr. Weeks say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with justice for all. Thank you, Dr. Weeks. Okay, so may I please have roll call? Miss Sinclair, I can't hear you.
Me either.
Take it without the headset. Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Benjamin?
I'm here.
Thank you. Dr. Stark? I think Dr. Stark is on her way in. Miss Ollie?
Present.
Thank you. Dr. Diaz?
Present.
And Mr. Hill?
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And now I'd like to have a motion to approve adoption of the agenda.
Carmen Trujillo, so moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
This is Lene Almy, I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. With that, the motion passes. All right, we will move on to community communications.
Thank you, Dr. Diaz. We have 6 community communications this evening. The first comes from Yolanda Wellington. She is writing in regard to a response to comments made at the June 30th, 2020 board meeting.
Ms. Sinclair, I just wanted to know, I will be doing a 5-minute time limit for each of these.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dear Phoenix Elementary Governing Board, thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts. This communication is in response to the public comment presented to the board on June 29th, 2020 by Shaw Montessori teacher Denise Hess. My name is Yolanda Wellington and I'm also a teacher at Shaw Montessori. I am a national board certified teacher with a master's degree in social work and a master's degree in education with a specialty in special education. I'm a board member for the Arizona K-12 Center here in Phoenix, Arizona. I am part of our district's equity team and I sit on Superintendent Hoffman's African American Advisory Board. I am also a Black woman. I was shocked and angered by the comments made by Mrs. Hess. I felt like I had not seen the elephant sitting in my living room. Yet I am thankful that it came out because I would have never suspected she had such views and values. Her statements are a testimony to the level of work that needs to be done in our Shaw community if we are to claim that we are truly a Montessori school and worthy of teaching children. Mrs. Hess's views do not properly represent Dr. Montessori's philosophy, although she presented her argument as if Dr. Montessori would be in agreement with her, using her life struggles to support her position. Prior to Montessori's exile from Mussolini from Europe, Mohandas Gandhi had spoken at a 1931 Montessori lecture. There he presented Dr. Montessori with the idea of extending her instructional practice and training beyond the European population to the marginalized children of India. While in exile in India from 1939 to 1946, she did with the replicated outcomes that human development and fundamental needs are the same regardless of gender, religion, and socioeconomic status or race. I do believe that Dr. Montessori would agree that Black Lives Matter. When given the correct environment, all humans can reach their human potentials, and the teacher is part of that environment. I also note that the 2019 PNAS Journal research article Mrs. Hess referenced when she debunked the established fact that Black lives are disproportionately killed by police officers was itself corrected 3 different times between January 2020 and April 2020. The corrections state that the research outcomes are misleading and skewed. Readers should take this into consideration before using the research results. I found this information by clicking the link that Mrs. Hess provided in her statement. They are listed above the article, easily accessible to the reader. There are many other things that I could say about Mrs. Hess's comments, but I want to focus on next steps. I have been in communication with Principal Ulleungdo and our community about how we can use this opportunity to move to action and positive change. Implicit bias testing and anti-racism staff training are obvious first steps, but then what? Another concern is that although we have not been in school since March, Mrs. Hess stated that she and others were afraid to speak up and are experiencing a hostile work environment. As her coworker, I take such statements seriously. I am asking that her claims are investigated and that others experiencing this are identified so that validated claims can be addressed. I'm asking for active involvement and appropriate resources from our governing board, district administration, and community experts to help us deconstruct and rebuild the race-based perspectives of Shaw Montessori. I am available to help move actions forward, and I have a list of community parents that are ready to help. I believe that if our community is willing to be vulnerable, our own racism with reflection on how it plays out in our lives, are open to guidance from experts that know how to do this work and follow through on their recommendations, we will then be on the road to reaching our fullest potential. Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to our future partnerships. Sincerely, Yolanda Wellington. Our next comment comes from Sarah Warren. She is writing in regards to school resource officers. Hello, I am a teacher at Lowell Elementary, one of the 7 schools scheduled to receive an SRO for the 2020-2021 academic year, with potential for a 3-year contract. I strongly oppose this contract. The funds that were secured through ADE provided 7 SROs and only 2 social workers. This blatant disparity in the allocation of these funds sends a disturbing message, one that prioritizes penalization over emotional health. Our youth don't need criminalization. Our youth need additional mental health services and support. Research does not show that increased presence of law enforcement makes schools safer. Additionally, Black and Latino students are criminalized and penalized disproportionately at a rate 3 times higher than their white peers. The presence of police in our schools runs counter to the mission of racial equity and justice. Additionally, that our district would be responsible for paying any additional raises for these police officers over the course of a 3-year contract is appalling. The use of these funds to employ additional social workers and mental health services would be a much more valuable investment. Police are not welcome at our schools. Kindly, Sarah Warren. Our third comment comes from Jacob Scott regarding school resource officers. Greetings, Phoenix Elementary School District Number 1 board members. I am a community member and I am writing to voice my strong opposition to the presence of SROs on school campuses. As you know, our student population within PESD number 1 are predominantly composed of students of color. Additionally, we are a Title I district. This demographic, non-white and low income, is the very demographic that is most likely to be criminalized in the legal system. Welcoming police officers into our schools will traumatize our students. The presence of police will not make our schools safer, only more threatening. The fact that the police presence is being considered on an elementary school campus is egregious. This is only lengthening the school to prison pipeline. I demand that the funds allocated for these officers go instead to mental health services for our students. Thank you for your time. Our fourth comment comes from Jay Barbudo regarding the opening of schools. I'd like those listening to take a moment to remember the lives of Kimberly Bird, teacher from the Hayden Winkleman School District, as well as Rosario Sotelo, an educator from Trevor Brown High School, both of whom lost their battle with COVID-19. Thank you. Good evening, President Diaz, Governing Board, Dr. Weeks, members of Cabinet, and those listening at home. My name is Jay Barbudo, and I am the immensely proud co-president of the Phoenix Elementary Classrooms Teachers Association. I wanted to take a moment tonight to speak to all the educators in our district, from our teachers to our support staff, our admin to our hourly, certified to classified. Over the past 5 months, which has felt like 5 years, you've gone above and beyond to serve the students of our district. You've put together work packets, contacted businesses asking for food donations, stood outside in sweltering heat to ensure that your students had access to a computer at home. You've sacrificed so much to ensure that the students of Phoenix Elementary are safe, fed, and learning. You did all of this in the middle of a pandemic. Just stop for a second and think about how insane that really is. You spent nights on your computer, emailing students, calling parents, updating your class dojo pages, all for one reason, to make sure that your students are doing all right. There are some days when you pour your cup of coffee and you're ready to roll, when other days it's hard to even get out of bed. I understand that, I live that. Some of you have been doing all of the things mentioned above, all while watching your children, caring for relatives, or even dealing with this miserable virus. Yet you get up every day and you lead. Why? It's because that's what educators do. We lead. Whether it's speaking out against inequities in society, preparing for a pandemic, or shouting at politicians who just don't seem to listen. Absolutely no one leads the march with a stronger pace than educators. Our schools will reopen again someday. We'll be back to pulling small groups, trying to get a 5 on critical thinking, enjoying lunch with our students, you name it. But remember, we hold the power. We will determine when it is safe to go back. Don't be intimidated by the hollow threats from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue or the absolute incompetence on the 19th floor of the Arizona Capitol building. Our district and our union worked to ensure that our schools remained closed until at least October 12th. So many districts followed us after that. Let's keep playing offense. Let's show the state what it really means to be Pecta strong. Our fifth comment comes from Marin Mahoney regarding school resources officers. To the board, I am emailing regarding agenda item 3C. As the mother of an incoming kindergartner, I am happy to see the addition of 2 social workers for the upcoming year. I am greatly concerned, however, that the board is considering adding 7 SROs, more than triple the number of social workers added. Did you know that even when controlling for poverty, schools with SROs have 5 times the arrest rates of schools without SROs? Adding SROs reinforces the school to prison pipeline, and I'm extremely disappointed and nervous that that will be happening in our schools. Is there a history of SROs in Phoenix Elementary District 1? If not, why are you adding them now? If yes, has the district tracked statistics and demographics of the students disciplined by these SROs to ensure students in one demographic are not disproportionately impacted and disciplined? Will the district be collecting and analyzing data in the future to ensure children are protected and treated equitably? Black students are much more likely to be targeted by SROs for disciplinary measures. Ironically, maybe, the very next agenda item focuses on abolishing systemic barriers to Black student success. You can start by adding more social workers and school counselors, not allowing SROs on our elementary school campus. Thank you for your time and attention. And our last comment comes from Octavia Helton regarding school resource officers. Hello, my name is Octavia Helton, and I am a parent of Bethune students. The reason I am writing this is to voice my opinion of the school resource officer for our school. I honestly feel that it is a benefit having him in our school because he has established healthy relationships with all of our students, and especially nowadays with the way police are negatively viewed in the media and in a way feared around the world. They are looked at as the bad guys. Our children need to see that they are not everything they see on TV. Excuse me. Our children need to see that not everything they see on TV is how all cops are. They need to have this relationship with the police force, and our resource officers offers this to our children. On top of the work he does at our school, it also helps our children feel safer at school, and my children have learned a lot from him. They learned about drug prevention, DUI, and about the K-9 units. I really hope we can offer our officer at the school to show our children that there is still a lot of good in this community, and he is a part of that. With the type of neighborhood we are in, it makes us parents feel at ease, as well as knowing we have so many others to care for their safety just as much as we do. Thank you for your time, and I hope this email helps. We appreciate you, Officer Walston. And that ends the community comments.
Thank you, Ms. Sinclair. Just as a reminder, board policy is that we do not comment on community communications, but we do hear and take note of everything that our community does share with us, and we appreciate the time that you take to voice your concerns and provide recommendations for us. With that, we will move on to item C1, request approval of the renewal agreement between Public Consulting Group and Phoenix Elementary School District.
Yes, Dr. Diaz, governing board members, cabinet, and community listening in. This is a request for the approval of the renewal agreement between PCG and our school district for the purpose of Medicaid school-based claiming program, to participate in that program. Medicaid is a federally funded program that allows a school district to be reimbursed for some of the costs associated with providing certain direct medical services to a child whose IEP states that they need those medical services. PCG stands for Public Consulting Group and is the middleman or third-party administrator agency that works with Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System, AHCCCS, and school districts across Arizona and the United States for the purpose of the Medicaid school-based claiming program, MCBC. Our school district bills for certain services that are documented in the IEP. For example, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, counseling that's provided by our social workers, nursing services, health aid services, which are referred to as activities of daily living for our medically fragile students, transportation services. The funding that we receive from Medicaid pays for our special ed teachers' stipends. They're hard to fill stipends, instructional stipends, facilitator stipends, and other special ed stipends that are necessary. Our Medicaid funding also pays for some of our staff salaries, and our Medicaid funding pays for special ed equipment that is needed for our special ed students as written in their IEPs. So administration recommends that the governing board approve this renewal agreement between PCG and our school district.
Thank you, Dr. McLaughlin. Can I have a motion to approve item C1?
So moved. This is Susan Benjamin.
Do I have a second?
This is Lene Almiel, second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Okay, hearing none, the motion passes. Is there any discussion or questions? I'm sorry, was I supposed to ask for discussion and questions before? I apologize.
It's a routine item anyway.
Are there any, can I still leave the, the floor open for any discussion and questions?
I think somebody would have stopped you if they had a question, so you're good.
All right. Sorry about that. So we will move on to item C2, which is receive, discuss, and take possible action on reopening schools plan.
Thank you, Dr. Diaz, governing board members, cabinet, and those in the community. We are asking that the board receive, discuss, and take possible action on the 2021 reopening plan as presented in Charting the Course to Safe Learning Handbook. As we all know, there is much uncertainty about how schools are to open, how we are to proceed for the 2021 school year. At our last board meeting, I read an excerpt from the American Pediatrics Association statement asserting the need for students to return to school in person. Since then, the American Pediatrics Association, the American Federation of Teachers, the National Education Association, and the School Superintendents Association collaborated on a statement about reopening schools. And there are two quotes that I'd like to share with you from this statement. The first one is, we should leave it to health experts to tell us when the time is best to open up school buildings and listen to educators and administrators to shape how we do it. And the second quote is, the pandemic has reminded so many that what we have long understood, that educators are invaluable in children's lives and that attending school in person offers children a wide array of health and educational benefits. For our country to truly value children, elected leaders must come together to appropriately support schools and safely returning students to the classroom and reopening schools. Last week, our governor held a press conference and said that he would have more information regarding schools reopening this week. We expect to hear from our governor this week. We are unsure if he will change the August 17th in-person date or not. Whatever he orders, we will respond accordingly to ensure that there is no harmful financial impact to our district, and most importantly, that our kids are safe, our families are safe, our staff is safe, and our students learn. Last week, a group of us attended a webinar organized by ASBA, ASBO, ADE, and the Arizona School Administrators Association. These groups attempted to provide guidance for school districts to move forward with plans, but there are still so many unknowns. For example, we were told that we will need to complete an enrollment stabilization grant to ensure our 100% of funding by July 31st, but the grant template is not completed and therefore not sent out to districts yet. Lots of uncertainty, and therefore Phoenix #1's Charting the Course to Safe Learning booklet is stamped with draft on every single page. We know that edits need to be made prior to publication. We know that some of the ideas and concepts included in this booklet are aspirational in nature. We know including this booklet in the board packet led teachers and other community members to call board members with questions. We ask everyone to extend grace and patience as district leaders collaborate with principals to ensure the decisions we are making keep our students at the heart of our decision making. Our principals are our key communicators, as well as the instructional leaders of their schools. District leaders trust our principals to make decisions that are best for their communities within the boundaries and framework provided. For example, principals in collaboration with their school's leadership team will determine how to best schedule online learning for their students within the framework that district leaders provided. There are certain instructional minutes that we are required to implement per the state. That dialogue about this booklet began with principals and IEISs today. You received the booklet on Thursday. Our principals received it on Friday. Obviously, more conversation is to come. We encourage our teachers to work with their principals to get answers to questions about what this will look like for their school and their students. We will keep in mind that our students are at the heart of every decision made. We do not make decisions based on adult convenience. We make decisions with our students' best interest in mind. Again, just a reminder, every page in this booklet is stamped with draft on every page. The booklet itself is divided into 2 sections, and our families and staff can reference those 2 sections. There will be more details coming for our staff and for our families. The teaching and learning section outlines plans for distance learning, which is our online instruction, as well as our plans for blended learning when we can come back in person. Blended learning is a blend of online instruction and in-person instruction. The topics that are missing from this booklet include meals. Our students will continue to receive meals. A schedule for meal pickups for each school will be texted out to our families as well as posted on our website. Learning labs, this idea of learning labs on campuses. We will introduce learning labs at our schools once it is deemed safe to return to campuses. The learning labs will provide a place for students whose parents are working away from home and can't care for them during the school day because they need to work. And therefore, we will provide learning labs on campuses. As of last Wednesday, we had 633 students that would need daycare if they chose the blended learning. So we will plan for learning labs to accommodate our families who need that daycare when the governor says it is okay to return to schools in person. Bus transportation to campuses as our schools reopen for the blended learning model. Students living within the district boundaries who are eligible for transportation will be provided bus transportation. The routes will be determined once we have the number and location of students enrolled in our blended learning program. At that time, bus transportation will also begin for students needing transportation to campuses for learning labs. Transportation will not resume for any students until the blended learning model is open for students. And the health and safety protocols that are outlined in the health and safety section of this handbook will be followed for transportation once that is okay for our students to be back in person. Also, there are things like our students all go through vision and hearing screening. Our nurses have worked under the guidance of our coordinator for health and wellness, and we have guidelines for how we will conduct vision and hearing screening. Attached to this board agenda item is more detail on protocols for what happens if a student is diagnosed with COVID, if a staff member is diagnosed with COVID. So many more guidelines to come. This plan will remain flexible and adapt to the most up-to-date requirements from ADE, the state government, and the federal government. And we thank all of our community for patience in these uncertain and difficult times. Administration recommends that the governing board receive, discuss, and take possible action on the 2021 Reopening Schools Plan as presented in the Charting the Course to Safe Learning Handbook. And I did want to pull that up. I will let you proceed.
Thank you, Dr. McLaughlin. Are there any questions or comments on this agenda item?
This is Susan Benjamin. I'm the one that asked for this, so I thought I would start. First, I'd like to thank Dr. McLaughlin and all the people that worked hard to put this together. It was a short timeline, and I know you had probably 90% of it. It was just a matter of organizing it, ready to go, but I still appreciate you doing it in such short order. My first question is, in the teaching and learning portion, Dr. McLaughlin, and you probably didn't have time for this, but I thought I'd ask anyways. Did any parents preview this? Oh.
I'm sorry, Ms. Benjamin, I was muted.
Okay. Well, I thank you for all the work that you did.
Oh, no, I heard you. I so appreciate those comments. Thank you very much. I was muted, so you couldn't hear me. Thank you very much. Yes, we were working on this behind the scenes as we presented PowerPoints, etc. And I do appreciate the board being patient with us getting it together. So thank you for those comments, Ms. Benjamin. Our family members who were on our general education team definitely had input into the teaching and learning section of the handbook.
Well, that's good, because I actually had a couple people. I have a family in Garfield that took a look at this, and a family over by where I live. And one of the questions that they had, both of them, had to do in the grading section. And I have this on paper, and you have this on your computer. It doesn't print with numbers on the pages, just so you know. But I'm looking at just the page that has grading on it. And it talks about increased reliance on formative assessment tools, greater use of mastery learning. This is how you're going to grade. And greater reliance on authentic assessment practices. You see that page?
Yes, ma'am. I will get to it.
There were a lot of questions on that. They were not quite sure what they were reading. And so I'm hoping that you'll be able to go back, and they called it Education Ease. Is what I got. I remember both of them. And so to explain that in parental terms, I think would be very helpful for them.
Agreed. Agreed, Ms. Benjamin. Thank you.
Yes. There's also, let's see if I can find this. There is a page that has yellow at the top that has teacher and staff commitments and family and student commitments. It's right at the very beginning. It's yellow at the top. They're right there. And under coursework, it says teachers commit to grading all assignments within 3 days, so students have feedback. You see that? And then over on grading and feedback, which is next to the page I was speaking about previously. Right, grading, and it says in the text at the top, teachers will try to grade submitted work within 3 days. So which one is correct?
That does seem like a discrepancy, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
They are conflicting information.
Right.
Let me get back with the group that worked on this, Ms. Benjamin, and we will determine that. And that group was principals, teachers, the whole general education action team. So we will refine that.
I will tell you that the two parents were like, I'd like to know. I'd like to know, you know, if it's going to be 3 days, if it's going to be 4 days. I'd like to have a commitment.
A definitive answer.
Whichever is appropriate.
And we all know that feedback is of extreme importance, and in our LOI and our learning observation instrument, it does say that feedback should be specific and immediate. So our students should be receiving feedback all along the way as a teacher is instructing. So yeah, we will work on that.
And another question came up, which had to do in gifted education.
Okay.
Okay, and it says, we will continue to accept gifted identification referrals and review them as per Arizona, the ADE guidelines. We may not be able to make determinations until we have a complete body of evidence. And their questions were, what's that mean? What's a complete body of evidence?
Yeah, we need more detail there about the actual identification process, the tests that we use, etc. So we will fix that. In the special education portion, I don't know that you have this yet because I talked to ADE and they didn't have it. But what's going to happen with the special needs children in preschool, our little preschoolers, and I'm not seeing anything. Although I talked to the director down there and she didn't have an answer either as of yet. So, Ms. Benjamin, our preschool team under the leadership of Ms. Salazar has put together a plan for the return of preschool students, and I was not able to get that to you prior to this board meeting. So please expect that plan.
Because about 4 days ago, I talked to the director and she could not tell me how you or many school districts use the creative curriculum. We're going to be able to implement that when children were home. So yeah. I'll be real interested to see that. And I guess my last question has to do with the social-emotional learning, and it's just a comment that I had asked you last time about would there be time, and this shows up in the scheduling and so forth, time for the children, considering they're not going to be seeing one another. Where's the time for group conversation and group play, to play games or do something build that classroom community. And I'm not seeing any reference to that.
You are accurate. There is no reference to that in the handbook. It's certainly something we can put in. That will be part of the schedule that our principals create with, of course, in collaboration with their teachers, their leadership teams. It is state law that we provide 2 15-minute recesses to our kindergarten through 5th graders. And of course, we have our 30-minute lunch recess time also. What will that look like? It will be much more structured than it has been in the past. Principals are considering, as our health and safety protocols outline, only one class on the playground at a time, on the field at a time, no use of the playground equipment, inside games, games within the classroom, games within the school courtyards, those schools that have courtyards. So our principals are determining how that will look and how it will even look online as far as.
That's my question is,
Yeah.
I think I have a good picture of what it'll look like, you know, using your own equipment in your classroom and going out and having designated areas. My question is, you know, you're going to have kinder and 1st and 2nd graders, and that's, well, for all of the kids, but especially those most new to school, that classroom community is really important, and having the opportunity to engage in something that's not quite so structured, where they actually have the opportunity to hang out, to play a game, do something with a peer, I think is really important. And so I just wanted to make sure that there's something in there about that opportunity for those especially the youngest children. Not that everybody doesn't need it, but I think the youngest we need to pay most attention to with that. That socialization. And I have one more question about, and I think I'm done with at least the first portion, about the dress code. It says uniforms aren't required during online instruction, but are encouraged. My question is that there are young ones, especially, and children with autism are another group, and sometimes children with ED who are going to and are having difficulty with masks. They're a challenge. And so one of the things that I'm actually involved in a group, and we've been sewing buttons on hats. And it seems that if the children don't have those wraps around their ears, they're much more able to wear them, and they don't come off as easily. And so hats may be an important piece for wearing masks for some children. And I think that needs to be discussed within the group, and whether or not people want to put it in IEPs for children with autism or ED or whoever they might be, that's one thing. But you've also got kinders and 1st and 2nd graders that it might be a real advantage for them to be able to have the opportunity, and they don't have those. And so I think it's important that we give them that opportunity so that they can be successful and be safe.
Thank you for that information.
I think I'm done with that portion. I have more in the second portion, but I'll leave it up to other people to discuss the teaching and learning or whatever they want to do.
This is Naomi. I have some.
Is
that okay? Okay.
Yeah.
So I just want to start by echoing Ms. Benjamin's point. This is a document for families and parents as I read it. The technical language for education is pretty rampant throughout. So I think that is difficult without the educational background, and really just being in the classroom every day, I think would be hard to read. So that's something that I do think that we should keep in mind. I also think it is very lengthy, which I know we need it to be thorough, but will there be some kind of like one pager that also goes out to families that condenses the information?
If that's the board's pleasure, we certainly will put that together.
Okay. And then has this document been translated?
Not yet. We wanted to get your approval first, and you're giving us a lot of valuable input. And so obviously there are a lot of revisions and edits that need to be made before we translate it.
Okay. I just want to ensure that it is, all 47 pages of it translated. If this is the document that we're providing to our families, then I just want to make sure it goes to all of our families and is accessible for all of them. Okay, as for my specific questions, on page 5, it mentions an individualized learning plan conference between teachers and parents. And I was just curious if you could speak a little bit more about what that might look like for teachers and families, if that is a Zoom call, if it's flexible, and just what kind of individualized learning plan they might be creating.
I think that's one of those aspirational concepts that I referred to in writing this. We really were thinking about ensuring differentiation for our students and meeting each student's individual needs. We weren't thinking of a formal 504, IEP, etc. This language was talked about today with the principals and the IISs. And so that language might disappear in revision and editing. We just want to ensure that folks are focused on meeting the needs of all of our different kiddos.
Okay, it's very similar to the language for our English language learners, which I think is why it was a formalized plan in my mind, similar to an ILLP. So that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, and then I have a question on the blended learning model in page 8, and I know that we're not doing blended learning right now, but this actually was a question I had at the last meeting as well. So yeah, right here, it says the 2-day rotation based on grade level. And I know that later, and we had discussed previously grouping siblings together. I'm just not understanding the based on grade level there. So if it's kindergarten, 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th, they go one day.
Yeah. So that this would be contradictory, right? We couldn't keep families together in a group, but also be grade levels. So good catch, Ms. Almy. We'll fix that.
And my other concern there is that with grade level splits, you're not decreasing the size of your classes. So if all the 4th graders are there, then I still have 30 kids in my class.
Very good.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So that was my confusion around that one.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 19 with the SEL, that is also a bit wordy. What my main concern, I think, for parents might be, if my child needs social emotional support, what do I do? And that was not answered there. So I think maybe just a contact, or, if you're concerned about your student's mental health, reach out to this person. Do I go to the teacher? Do I go to Miss Wadley? Do I go to my school social worker? And who is that? In reading that section, that's the information that I was looking for. And so that might also be better in the one pager.
Okay, good point. We need to consider who our audience is. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and then just one question that came from the more detailed, well, actually I think they're less detailed, but the protocol page, and then also on page 28 of this, it talks about taking temperatures, and that just says one staff member will take all student temperatures. The question there was just, would that be the teacher, and do we have a thermometer for every teacher, or is that the nurse who's going to visit every classroom during that time? I guess I just wasn't sure if it read as one staff member per school or a staff member.
I'm going to defer that question to Dr. Diaz. So okay. Dr. Diaz, can you weigh in here?
Yes, I can. Ms. Alby, members of the board, good evening. I apologize, I have my video off. I'm calling in from Montana, and the meeting moves a lot smoother if I don't have my video on. We left this as a staff member because a lot of that is still to be determined. In terms of what we have determined, we have ordered a thermometer for each grade level at each school. And so we would anticipate as something like a grade level lead. Could be a teacher, could be instructional assistant, it could be an administrator. As you know, we're rebuilding our schools brick by brick from the ground up. And so when it comes time to start laying those bricks, we will work with our schools to make determination of, obviously who's best trained and who's in the best position to take those temperatures. But we are ordering enough resources and anticipating having the resources to make sure that we can do this.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And Dr. Diaz, I think my last question is for you as well. Page 45, the very end. I was just curious if you could explain the need for the 2 negative COVID tests to return.
Yeah, it's fluid. Well, one of the things that we have heard about from the county is that somebody can test negative, and then that test could come back positive just a couple of days later. And so we wanted to make sure we have 2 negatives. At the same time, I just learned today of somebody in our district whose doctor has said they will not be retested for, I believe, 6 weeks, because doctors are finding more and more that you will continue to test positive for COVID for up to 6 weeks, although you may not have, you may have recovered from your symptoms and you may feel you're in good health. And so, again, it's another piece that's very, very fluid in terms of our understanding of what the county is recommending to us.
Okay, thank you. I just kind of wanted to discuss those things, and I realized that we don't have all the answers and no one has all the answers and things will change. So I appreciate your answers, but that's all I have for now.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I hear my son crying. Go ahead, Ms. Benjamin.
I just want to speak a little bit about the procedures when children are back on campus. And I imagine you're going to do this. You're going to add this portion before that occurs. But I think I just wanted to say that I think it's really important that we're very specific with some of these things. For example, on the bus. I think it's important that we're explicit to say when you enter the bus, you're seated in the back of the bus. When you get off the bus, first off are the children in the front of the bus. And so bus drivers and bus aides have a very explicit understanding about what their job is in terms of getting kids on and then getting children off. And that's just one of the examples. I would like to see more information about masks because, we're learning that masking up is really, really important. And we know that, we believe that if you're 6 feet apart, then you really don't need one. But I think about the fact that I'm in a classroom and I've got 12 children and they're walking past one another to go get a drink, wash their hands, get a book, do whatever. Yeah, and they're not 6 feet apart. And so every time they get up, they have to put their mask on. I'm just thinking about all of the work that a teacher is going to have to do about masking up and what the rules are and how that ultimately looks. So I hope that there's ongoing conversations about that. I know, and I'm not suggesting this, but I know some districts are just saying you mask up. And that's the way it is. And I'm not suggesting that's really the right answer, but I think we just need to give teachers the direction they need so that everybody can be safe in their classrooms. And teachers feel comfortable and the children both are safe, both teacher and students are safe throughout all that. The other thing I wanted to say is, I read an interesting article in the New York Times yesterday related to teaching outside. And we know that there's been some discussion about what happens with the HVAC and how all that works and what could happen. And we have an opportunity, if our children come back October 12th, our temperatures might be more amenable to children being outside. And I know you talked about having doors open and windows open and various things. And there are some schools that are really not, like I know at Capitol, you go in like pods. And so it's hard to have, there aren't windows. It's hard to, get the kids out. And so I'm wondering if you're going to have any kind of specificity in terms of like math and science will be outside for such, so many kids, or that ELA, when they're doing particular projects, will be outside, because I think we've learned that the more we're outside, the safer we are.
We have been talking, Ms. Benjamin, about moving classrooms outside. So yes, that we are exploring that possibility if we come back in October.
Yeah, I think that is, considering our weather, we have the opportunity to have several months when we would have some of our children outside. My last question has to do with peer, and that I didn't see anything about peer in there. But my understanding is that parents are going to need daycare, correct?
Yes, Ms. Benjamin, parents will need daycare until the governor orders that we are able to be back on campus. We are not able to provide daycare per legal counsel.
But on October 12th, we'll start to do that. Is that correct?
As soon as the governor says that it's okay. If he says before October 12th, we will provide daycare prior to October 12th.
Okay.
That is the Learning Lab idea. And yes, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Curtis Johnson, our coordinator of peer, is working on a plan very closely with Dr. Brown and our principals.
My only comment, and I understand parents need support and they need daycare because they have to go back to work, But, one of the things you talked about was having children in pods so that, these 15 kids ate lunch together, did all their instruction together, played outside together, but then we're going to distribute them to a bunch of other adults and they're going to mix in with a bunch of other kids for peer. Or how are you looking at that in terms of how you're going to kind of keep children together so that some of that continuity is carried to peer?
We share your concern. We want that continuity carried to peer. Do we have a plan in writing yet? We don't.
Okay,
So
thank you.
We share your concern.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I have a few questions, Dr. McLaughlin, and I appreciate that you guys responded to them earlier, but I think that it would just be important to address these specific logistical questions for any of our staff that's listening in. So I'm just gonna kind of run through them and then I'll ask some follow-ups as well. So I guess first I'll back up. It sounds like every one of our schools will need to make specific logistical decisions when it comes to prep time, lunch, those types of things. Have principals and assistant principals been made aware that they are responsible for essentially providing that specific guidance to our teachers? Because the feedback I've received from teachers is that they have not been given that guidance from their administration, and some of the admin are confused themselves on whether or not they should be providing that specific guidance or if they're going to be receiving these specific logistics from the district. So if you could just speak to that first, that would be helpful.
So in normal times, we meet with our principals at the beginning of June, and then we don't see each other again until mid-July. And that's because normally we start planning for the following year come February, and all of our plans are set come May. So our June Leadership Summit is focused on tying up the previous school year and solidifying those plans for the following school year. This summer has been not normal, and we have been meeting with our principals who are 12-month employees on a weekly basis, if not once, maybe 2 or 3 times during the week. Principals were provided in May scheduling guidelines for this is how many instructional minutes you need for ELA, etc. As I mentioned earlier, today was the first time we met with our principals and IEISs and just began the dialogue regarding this handbook that's in front of you. But they have received all of the recommendations. So what we do is we communicate with the principals prior to the board. Then we communicate with we get the principals' input, and then we communicate with the board. So our principals are well aware of what the expectations are, and they do know that just like they always are, they're in charge of scheduling, they're in charge of communicating with their teachers. Perhaps they're respecting their teachers' summer and not bringing their teachers in until June 30th on all the plans. I know that we have filled out, our federal programs department has completed many, many ETRs because our principals have been meeting with teachers, have been having emergency staff meetings, have been meeting with their leadership teams all summer long. Our 12-month employees are used to saving their vacation days until the summer, and they haven't had vacation this summer. I'm not sure, I can't explain the confusion, but I can tell you that we have everything that has come to the board and more, because we can't possibly share all the details that we share with our principals, with the board. Our principals are well aware, and I trust that they have determined how best to communicate with their teachers. And like I said, perhaps they're respecting their teachers' summer, and will communicate out on July 30th when teachers return. But I do know many of them have been meeting with teachers because we've been filling out the ETRs because teachers aren't on contract, so they're getting paid $25 per hour for any work that they do over the summer.
Okay.
And Dr. McLaughlin, if I could chime in there too, Dr. Diaz, you specifically mentioned two things that are part of our meet and confer agreement with the Phoenix Elementary Classroom Teachers Association. Last time I spoke with leadership, I indicated that we will need to reconvene in all likelihood next week around a number of topics, including prep time and duty-free lunch. Prior to our announcement that we would stay online to the end of the first quarter, we were certainly feeling much more pressure for trying to figure out how a 30-minute duty-free lunch and how a 225-minute per week prep period would look, given the safety protocols that we put together. And so we have not planned that out yet, in part because we want to make sure we're sure what we're planning is going to stick. So we don't take hours and hours and hours building something that eventually comes undone. At the same time, we do need to hear from our administrators more about the parameters that are already put into place. The 30-minute duty-free lunch, the 225-minute prep requirement. If we see that our principals are able to meet those and meet the needs of the online instruction that we're building now, we may find that we don't have to meet and confer about that because we can maintain that agreement. It'll look different from campus to campus, just like it does every year, but we'll make sure that those parameters are held. And so I think we're a week away from knowing that for sure.
Can I add a little bit as well? This is Dr. Brown, and I was in the meetings this afternoon and this morning with principals, and one of the things that I specifically spoke with them about was regarding scheduling and what does an online day look like for a kinder versus a 7th grader, and how that might look different for both the students and the teachers. And so we understand that some of our principals are anxious to get at least a little bit more specific guidance to make sure that what they're planning is in line with what others might be planning. So that is a commitment that we talked about today. And so that extra layer of specificity, just so that they can make sure that they're within the framework, will be provided to principals as well. So I told them just today that we'll outline that for them.
And principals are meeting on Wednesday morning. That is their time to collaborate and pull together and learn from one another.
Thank you. I appreciate your responses, and I think it definitely is going to be helpful once principals communicate these expectations to our teachers. I hope that they can communicate them sooner than later, because I'm sure teachers are pretty anxious to know a lot of these logistical types of questions. I just wanted to run through a few categories here just to make sure that these are decisions that need to be made at the local level, meaning at the specific school site. So ILPs are referenced several times with different board members. Just to clarify, that is purely aspirational and that's a site-based decision?
Not a site-based decision, aspirational at the at all levels, and we will come together on that. We envision that that term will be taken out of our handbook, and it'll just be a reminder to teachers to ensure that they're differentiating and meeting students' needs. So it seems like that term ILPs caused a lot of consternation on people's part, so we will gladly take that out of the handbook and just put in there that teachers are expected to differentiate just like they do.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And then when it comes to the daily schedule, so specifically what the daily schedule looks like for a teacher, like, you know, when they have prep time versus when they're expected to have prep time versus lunchtime versus collaboration versus live lessons, are those decisions made at the school level?
Yes, within the boundaries that district leaders presented that are in our meet and confer agreement. Our meet and confer agreement says that all teachers will have 225 minutes of prep time per week, a 30-minute duty-free lunch. So all of those things still stand. Those haven't changed. Our state requires us to have certain instructional minutes for ELA, for math, for social studies, for science. So all of those things are still in play. Requires us to have recess for K-5, an extra 15-minute recess. All of those things are still in play.
And then, so with that, will schools, each school site, who will be communicating to parents, like, this is what your kid's day is going to look like? Is that the teacher, or is the expectation that the school site creates that schedule?
Usually the teacher communicates that on Meet the Teacher Night. This is what our schedule looks like. These are the days we have PE, these are the days we have music, and our principals will communicate that to their teachers. Okay.
In terms, this was kind of asked already, but in terms of grading, I know that we're still trying to figure out, is it 3 days or is it within the 3-day window? Is there going to be flexibility in terms of grading and when they need to have that done? Just because I imagine that, you know, being a former teacher myself, submitting grades every 3 days on assignments is pretty difficult to do. So I just would hope that we have a little more flexibility there.
Yeah, I'm sorry we put an actual number of days in the handbook. We will take those number of days out and provide flexibility.
Okay, great. So the teacher website is referring to Google Classroom at a minimum.
Yes, an aspirational goal is to have websites eventually, but again, that's aspirational for down the road. We need to all get comfortable with Google Classrooms, be trained as Google educators, level 1 training from G Suite before we move on to those more aspirational goals.
Okay, and then in terms of technology, will all parents and teachers have their technology needs met prior to August 6th?
That is our goal. That's really our priority right now of our principals and their teams, is to ensure that every child has a device and that every child has internet connectivity prior to August 6th. July 27th, so next Monday, starts laptop distributions at our schools.
Okay, and principals will be communicating those logistics with their specific communities?
Yep.
Okay. And so then when it comes to paper documents, is the assumption then that our parents won't need hard copies?
That is correct. This is truly distance learning. This is truly an online school. That the passing of papers or or any materials back and forth, we're going to limit that as much as possible.
Okay. And then in terms of live lessons versus recording, I know that is in the document itself. In terms of like logistically how that is set out, does a teacher decide that, or is it site-based? So for example, do teachers, are they expected to teach from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. as a live lesson, or do they structure these lessons and the units based on like their own personal classroom needs? How does that work?
Our intent is not to, I want to use the word govern, how teachers teach. We're not in the business of writing lesson plans for teachers. The parameters that we set forth were 3 to 5 hours of live lessons each day. That doesn't mean 3 to 5 consecutive hours. That might be 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. Teachers know best what their students need. So a live lesson might be with a whole group, or a live lesson might be with a small group while the other students are working asynchronously. So we are setting the big frame, the big picture, if you will, and it's up to teachers to decide, how do I best differentiate for my students within these parameters?
So thank you for answering these questions. I have one more primary question. The PD schedule and the assessment schedule, in terms of like summative or benchmarks, those types of things, is that going to be provided to teachers, or how is that going to work? How do they know when to test their kids and then when their PD is?
We started our PD planning in February, and the pandemic hit, so we haven't gotten back to it. As soon as we have an opportunity to put pen to paper and get that PD, what's in everybody's head, on paper, we will get it out to our principals, who will communicate it out to our teachers. And as far as the assessment calendar goes, we do have a draft assessment calendar that we haven't shared yet because we don't have guidance from the state. The webinar that we went to last week said that they do not know if we will be administering the AZM2 or not. If we don't administer the AZM2, the state's in danger of losing funds. Our state doesn't want to lose funds, just like our school districts don't want to lose funds. So we probably will be taking the AZM2 next year, but we still don't know. So until things are solidified, we really can't provide, we don't want to provide an assessment calendar and then have to take it back. We do know that this is our last grant. This is our last year participating in the TIF4 grant, and therefore we will have to have some sort of pre and post assessment that measures our students' growth in order for our teachers to receive performance-based compensation. That will most likely be our Galileo pre and post. But again, no final decisions have been made. There's still so many things to iron out. And I apologize for the ambiguity and the uncertainty, but that's just the context that we are in right now.
Thank you. I think, yeah, totally makes sense that we're really learning as we go. I know that this has been communicated to principals. And I don't know if you guys have already, written them a note or how it was conveyed to them, but if it seems appropriate, I think having a communication to our principals and admin that explicitly states, you guys are really responsible for figuring out how to implement these more broad guidelines and communicating that with your teachers, so our admin feel empowered to do so and they're not waiting on us, and so our teachers can have these answers right away.
Most definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure you guys have done that. I just, if it seems appropriate to do it again or just reiterate that, I think that would be helpful. And then finally, when we do go to learning labs, and you might not have the answer to this yet, but when we do go to learning labs, how will we decide what staff, who staffs that?
Yeah, we don't have that answer yet, Dr. Diaz. As soon as we do, we'll let you know.
Okay, thank you very much. That is all that I have for now. Thank you. Is there any other discussion on this item?
Yes, ma'am. I only have a few. So this is Carmen. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you, Ms. Trujillo.
Thank you kindly. So, and I'm asking this only because I don't know the difference, but as far as the Google G Suite, is that similar to the Google Classroom as far as like the interactive spot that will be available? Or are those like one and the same type of program?
Yes, Ms. Trujillo, the G Suite just refers to Google Classroom, Google Meets. It includes the G Suite refers to everything that's within Google Classroom, Google Meets, etc. There are many different apps inside the G Suite, Google Classroom being the main one.
Got it. The only reason that made me look for it and wonder about it was because it does list here that we do expect and staff to respond within a school day to communication. So I just wondered, is there an avenue that will just be, you know, the one-stop shop spot for that? Is that possible through Google Classroom, or does everybody kind of use like Class Dojo and it's, you know, different for everybody?
Ms. Trujillo, you kind of broke up there. I apologize.
Fan is on because I just like to have all the fans going. But my question was, if we're using that spot and we are requiring teachers to respond to emails and messages within one school day, will there be one hub for all of that communication to go through, or is it going to be different methods where some parents text, some email, some send notes every day? I'm just wondering what that expectation kind of looks like.
Yeah, our teachers choose what format they use and how they best communicate with parents. You're right, some teachers use Dojo, some teachers prefer text. They use our district text or Remind Me. There's a few different things. Some teachers prefer email, some teachers prefer phone. So teachers usually inform their families on Meet the Teacher Night, if you will, about how to best communicate with them. A lot of teachers ask families, how do you want me to communicate with you? And they flex according to the family's needs.
Righty. My next question, kind of I swerve left, but is because we talk about the cloth face coverings, I perceive that as like something that's washable. Am I understanding that correctly, or are these like disposable masks and stuff that we're going to be providing?
Dr. Diaz, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, Ms. Trujillo, members of the board. We, in this document, were very careful to say face coverings because we do know that there are several different kinds that people can use. Some are certainly more effective than others. So we have asked, or we have been promoting cloth face coverings, those cloth masks that are indeed washable. Those are what we're treating as sort of the gold standard. In our offices now, we do have the disposable ones available for members of the public who may come in and do not have a face covering. I also know some people that are using those modified scarf turtlenecks and that are using those to mask up, which are also washable. Clearly, sustainability matters a ton here. And so we want to make sure that we're promoting the most sustainable and the most healthy, which tends to be the cloth face masks.
So with that in mind, immediately it comes, I'm wondering if our sites are equipped with like a small washer and dryer, like one of those stackable things for other stuff. So that way there's just a space for those to get clean so people aren't bringing them back and forth and maybe not washing them because, you know, they're so busy doing other stuff. So is that at all a possibility to have access to something like that?
Yeah, great question.
On
It was, yeah, we definitely discussed it. We talked about whether or not we could even assign masks per day, and have a laundry basket, if you will, at the exit and at the entrance so that people could, our students and staff could throw them out, and then we could have a laundry service. Again, as soon as
Nice.
we announced that we would not have in-person learning start for, I believe, you know, a dozen or so weeks from now, we stopped
Yeah.
talking about that so that we could focus more on the more timely things. But that has definitely been something that we've discussed.
All right. I know I had one more question in here and I don't see it right now. But I'm really glad to hear. It was about attendance. I don't know where I wrote it down. That might be it. As far as the extra duties for our custodians, you did mention, Dr. Diaz, that the meet and confer process would happen again. And with all the extra duties that I foresee the custodians taking on, will they be able to, I think I remember correctly, they didn't really participate or choose to participate too much during the meet and confer process as far as ESPA is concerned. So since that might happen again, is that, I don't know, what does that conversation look like? Are they able to kind of make some requests or? Yeah, I don't really know.
No, great question. ESPA this year chose not to conduct a meet and confer process as described in policy, but rather chose to let administration state what it was planning to do with regards to raises and insurance. And then once that was announced and they felt good about it, those were agreed to. And so those are the only parts of the agreement with ESPA this year. And so that is not something that's currently in a meet and confer agreement with ESPA. We're being very mindful right now that just about everybody in the district's full-time, I shouldn't say full-time, but majority of their job is currently described in the job description as other duties as assigned. Very, very many of us are doing things that are stepping far above and beyond our job descriptions. As it pertains to our custodians, we've worked very closely with the custodial manager to ensure that the protocols we put together for disinfecting are in line with regular cleaning practices so that our custodians are not feeling overwhelmed by the burden of disinfecting, but rather they've integrated with that within the practices they've already done. At the same time, there may be a need for us to deepen the custodian bench in order to broaden their reach. And so knowing that during first quarter, there are going to be some employees whose full-time duties are in question because when we don't have students, we may not need something like a crossing guard or a bus driver. And so we have already started to look into how else we can utilize people from different employee groups. In our health and safety action team once, we even discussed a better classroom cleaning procedure that students and teachers could do in order to take some of the burden off of our custodians to doing cleaning so that they could have more time, more resources to do disinfecting. So while those have not taken place in a meet and confer venue with the between ESPA and administration, they're all things that have been considered and things that we are working on and that we are talking about.
Wonderful. Good. That makes me happy being a in the field person that I am. I get the brunt of extra duties as needed. So I do understand how overwhelming it can be and how much it can take a toll on your personal life as much as you are dedicated to getting your job done. So that's why it's a big concern to me. Lastly, I just wondered if our intercoms at like our schools and stuff could be set up to kind of just either have, you know, ongoing reminders about distancing, washing our hands and stuff, only because in reading through the document, there's a lot of if feasible, you know, if cost permits, you know, the plastic barriers and things like that come to mind. And so I know we have limited resources and just diversity across the district. So I just wondered if that was discussed at all. I don't know how good our technology is for those intercoms, but just being out in the community, sometimes you hear them kind of going off, and it is a good tool, a reminder to kind of self-check, you know, self-aware. So that was my last question because I couldn't find my other one.
Yeah, another great piece of insight, Mr. Hill. You know, as we're thinking about this, we're thinking about the buildings that are currently already open, Emerson Court and Plant Services. We have seen that there is a need, like any procedure or protocol or behavior that we're trying to champion, there is a need to reinforce it positively and proactively. And so one of the things that we're already doing at Emerson Court is when we have people working in person, they should be getting checked on every day. Just a very quick, hey, how are you feeling? Please remember to sorts of conversation. We've also distributed an email with a bulleted list of reminders that we've made sure to post. You can expect to see those same kinds of things happening in schools. Just like, you know, when I walk around a school with high evidence of PBIS, I'm going to see hall room expectations for behavior. You're going to see those posted around as well. And you're going to hear a principal, I'm sure, come up with a snappy acronym or a way to use their mascot to talk about how to reinforce these things. We're very excited that we are as far along as we are with PBIS. You know, PBIS, as adults, we're taking responsibility for teaching behaviors, and that we can actually do that in schools. So wearing masks, washing your hands, covering your mouth with the crook of your elbow when you sneeze, not touching your face, and certainly not, you know, slopping your mocos with your palm. Those are all things that we can make sure that our teachers are able to reinforce with all of our learners.
I love it. Thank you very much. And I do really appreciate and enjoy the idea of the students participating in this process, because I just feel like responsibility really just builds character and collective, and I'm just happy to hear it. So thank you all very much. This is a great plan.
I have a few follow-up. Carmen, are you finished with your questions?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
I have a few follow-up questions. Dr. McLaughlin, is it possible to request some type of deadline for our admin or our principals to communicate these logistical details to their staff? I know that we want to leave these decisions to our sites because every community is unique, but I would hate for, you know, some schools to get this certainty, you know, say tomorrow, and then another school, you know, wouldn't receive this information 2 days before they open. So if we could give some type of deadline for communicating, that I think would be really helpful. So at least we're standardizing that.
Thank you, Dr. Diaz. I had trouble finding my unmute button. I'm looking at the calendar. As I mentioned, our principals are meeting again on Wednesday, July 22nd. Creating a schedule is tough work, and they have already created a schedule and submitted it into Synergy. That would be a schedule for in-person school. And they had approximately 5 weeks to work on that. So I know we don't have 5 weeks. I really think that I couldn't put a deadline any sooner than Monday, July 27th on principals. And I think that's the soonest that we could communicate out.
I think that's fine. I think as long as teachers by June 30th have a clear understanding of what is expected from them, that would be, I guess, the minimum of what we could ask for. I think by June 30th, a teacher should know, if there are any expectations for lunch or prep time or grading that are very specific to those communities, I think that needs to be communicated on day one. And if it can't be, then for whatever reason, then the principal should let them know when to expect that. So at least some type of certainty on June 30th for when teachers will know these logistical details.
Agreed. By July 30th, that very first staff meeting, when all staff return, our principals will have all the logistics planned and we'll present those to their staff.
Okay. And the principals are aware of that expectation?
Yes, yes, they are.
Okay, thank you. And then the final question I have is, since there's so much uncertainty on when we will come back, or even if we come back, do we have to close again? I think that technology is going to be something that needs to be permanently embedded into our ecosystem as a district. So do we have plans, or are we starting to have the discussion on how we're going to be receiving feedback from the teachers, the principals, the students themselves, the parents, on how successful this has been, what we want to modify, those types of things?
Certainly, evaluation is always part of the plan. So yes, we will definitely gather feedback from all our community members on how this is going and adjust.
Perfect, thank you. And I think once we start to get that feedback, just being able to present that to the boards, we can have some follow-up discussion. I think that would be really helpful.
Certainly, yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, are there any other comments or questions on this agenda item?
This is Carmen Trujillo. I have one last one, only because I'm a little bit confused. As far as the daycare portion of our plan, is that coming before or after the October 12th date?
That depends on what the governor's executive order is, Ms. Trujillo. If the governor says that we must provide daycare, then we will provide daycare. Right now, the governor is saying that no one can be on campus in person until August 17th. So we should get greater clarity from the governor regarding when we can have students back on campus this week.
Okay, and one last clarifying piece. Isn't that the same thing that we are calling the learning lab?
Correct, yes.
Or not?
Yes.
Okay.
So learning labs, whoops, I'm sorry.
No, I just wondered if that was going to be run by teachers, or would that be that a different support staff?
It really depends how many students we have that need daycare. Right now we have 633 students that are requiring that. That might change. We honestly don't know. Right now we're thinking about support staff, but we might need teacher volunteers also. But I'm hesitant to say anything because we don't have a solid plan in place, and I don't want to overpromise, underdeliver. I don't want to I don't want to concern anybody, raise anybody's anxiety level when we don't have a firm plan in place.
No, I completely agree, and I'm really thankful for your leadership during this whole thing. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much for the extra information.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, this agenda item says take possible action. So would the action be to approve this draft?
Yes, Dr. Diaz.
So it's based on the comments that we've had during this discussion, it sounds like there's a lot of edits that need to be made. Particularly, it sounds like there almost needs to be two documents, one for parents and one that is detailed like this one that would give guidance to our staff. So I'm not exactly sure what would we be approving the document with suggested amendments, or are we approving two different documents?
With the dialogue kind of embedded with regards to some of the.
Dr. Weeks, I can't hear you.
I got a new microphone and everything. How about that? Is that better?
That's perfect, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so the board is reviewing the single document. This document was really drafted for families, and there's certainly lots of positive feedback. But what you would be,
Dr. Weeks, I can't hear you at all.
You can't hear me at all, Miss Benjamin?
Now I can see your mouth moving.
Okay.
Miss Benjamin,
Anybody else having trouble hearing me? Everybody else can hear me? Denise, you can hear me? Okay. So we're going to have to get some of this information to Mrs. Benjamin, because I know that for a large portion of this, she's had some technical difficulties. But at the end of the day, hold on one second. You need something, Rob? You need to check my audio? Okay.
While they're working on Dr. Weeks' audio, my thought with the one pager for families is that's probably more of just a marketing and communications document. So I don't think that that needs to be approved by the board. So I kind of mentioned it. I am comfortable approving this document with the changes, if that's what we choose to do, and just leaving the creation of any kind of one pager to the marketing department.
Okay. Sounds good. I'll wait for Dr. Weeks to join us.
I'm back. I'm back.
Okay, Dr. Weeks, so it sounds like Ms. Almey's comment was more of just a supplemental recommendation. So it sounds like we can move forward with approving this document with the understanding that there will be modifications to it.
Yes, and I think the board understands clearly that this is a very fluid situation, and there will continue to be modifications. And so if the board is comfortable with kind of the framework that we presented to you, then I would move forward with approving the document, and we will move forward with continuing to make more recommendations and provide additional detail as we get more information.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, do I have a motion to approve the...
Could you tell me what he said? I still can't hear him. This is Susan Benjamin.
Dr. Weeks just mentioned that this is a fluid document, and that admin will continue to make changes as we get more information, and we'll continue to specify as we get more information. So as long as we're okay with knowing that, we would be adopting this framework that's presented here.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are there any additional questions? Okay, can I please have a motion to approve the reopening schools plan, charting the course to safe learning handbook?
So moved. This is Susan Benjamin.
Do I have a second?
This is Lene Almy, I'll second.
Okay, so I guess this is where a discussion would happen or questions. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed say nay. Okay, with that, the motion passes, and we'll move on to item C3. Receive, discuss, and take possible action on agreement with City of Phoenix school resource officers.
Thank you, Dr. Diaz, governing board members, community members. Phoenix #1 wrote for and received the school safety grant from ADE in May. These grant funds provide for social workers and school resource officers. There are 2 different agreements within this grant. On May 14th, 2020, the governing board approved a new job description and salary schedule for the social workers that were granted through the ADE school safety grant. The grant awarded Phoenix #1 2 social worker positions, one for Kenilworth and one for Dunbar. The grant requires ADE school social work certification experience with special needs for these social workers, and they have responsibilities above and beyond what our social workers have, which includes attend ADE meetings, serve as an active member on the school safety team, data collection and reporting regarding bullying, threats, etc. That's all submitted to ADE. So you approved on May 14th the newly written job description for these 2 social workers, as well as the different salary schedule, because these are funds from a grant. You do have in front of you, attached to this board agenda item, the IGA with the City of Phoenix to provide 7 school resource officers to 7 of our schools for the 2021 school year. Those 7 schools are Capital, Edison, Lowell, Heard, Bethune, Herrera, and Whittier. And the SRO's responsibilities are outlined in your board book. This intergovernmental agenda ends on May 26, 2020. These ADE, although the IGA ends on May 26, 2021, these ADE school safety grants for the 7 SROs are available to the district for 3 years, fiscal year 2021 to fiscal year 2023. The grant does not fund increases to SRO salaries should the City of Phoenix raise police officers' salaries. Therefore, the district would pay for the SRO's salaries, or raises rather.
Dr. McLaughlin.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure when the appropriate time to do this is, but before you get into the content of the survey, I don't even know if I can do this right now, but I would like to request that we table this conversation because we still have, I think we really need more information from our community and our students. And quite frankly, I think we need experts in the field that have researched this topic to provide data on the appropriateness of it in K-8 schools. So I would like to make a recommendation to table this. So I don't know how to do that, or if we continue with the presentation and allow for comments.
Dr. Diaz, you can amend the motion or amend the motion to table.
Okay. So right now I would amend item C3 to table.
So the motion on the floor right now is administration recommends the governing board receive, discuss, and take possible action on an agreement with the City of Phoenix for school resource officers for the 2020-21 school year. There would need to be a first and a second And if there were none, there could be an amended motion to table this until a future date.
Okay.
I think because it's a take possible action, we don't have to take any action. So we can receive and discuss it if you would like. But it's a take possible action, which I think could be approve, could also be reject, and I think could also be table.
Okay. Well, I think that we need a lot more information in order to really have a comprehensive discussion on this. I know several of us have asked for some data on how our SROs have interacted with our schools in the past, and I think that needs to be presented to us before we can take a position on this, as well as I know that we do have quite a few survey responses, but I think proportionally speaking, it's not indicative of our entire community that would be affected. So I think that needs to come into play with this discussion. So are there any comments or opinions on whether you guys would like to discuss this, or are you guys okay with tabling this?
Maybe Dr. Diaz, what you'd want to do is have a first and second to open up for discussion.
Do I have a motion to open up for discussion?
Can the motion be to table?
Say that again, Ms. Almy.
Can the motion be to table the item? I don't want to make a motion to approve this item, but I would make a
think
motion
your
to table
point
it.
Yeah, it says receive, discuss, and take possible action. So receive and discuss, I think, is what's on the table right now.
We can do that without a motion though.
I don't want to confuse the issue, but I do have survey data to share with you if you would like to see it. I don't know if there needs to be a motion prior to that.
Okay. So my opinion is that I appreciate the survey data that has been received. It just does not seem complete at this time. And I think that we really need more data from our community in order to have this discussion. So I am really in favor with tabling it. Dr. Weeks, with the caveat that our admin would speak with ADE to ensure that we have the flexibility to push this deadline past August 1st, because I do know that there needs to be some type of decision by August 1st, but it seems like with how fluid COVID is and the priorities elsewhere, it sounds like we would have the flexibility to push this decision out.
Yeah, we'd be happy to talk to both ADE and City of Phoenix Police Department with regards to the board's recommendation to table this item for a future date. We can let both of those groups know that this is where the board's at this time.
And I do know, Dr. Weeks, that the plan is, regardless of what does happen with this specific agenda item, is to create a task force of sorts that would really discuss school safety and the mental health and well-being of our students. And we would be pulling in our social workers, our psychologists, our educators, and parents and students to figure out what that looks like. So I don't want to take away from the larger discussion, but for this specific grant that is affecting seven schools.
It's affecting 7 schools. So I think we need a little bit of clarity, and I want to thank Dr. McLaughlin for providing that. So the grant has been awarded. What's on the table in front of the board today is the intergovernmental agreement with the City of Phoenix, which has not yet been approved. So the grant resources have been allocated to the district for the 7 schools for the SROs. It's whether or not the governing board wants to approve the intergovernmental agreement to actually accept the SROs onto the campuses.
Mhm. Totally makes sense. I don't think that we have enough data on what the SROs have or haven't done in the past. And I don't think that we have enough data from our parents. And I do think that our primary stakeholder here is the students. So I do think their voices need to be heard, and all of this can advise and inform our decision. That's my opinion. So I would really prefer to table it, but there's 4 other board members on here. So do I have any other thoughts?
This is Lene Almy. So first, I'm going to say I looked up Robert's rules really quickly. So what we would do instead of tabling is postpone consideration of the matter until we have more information. And I would be in favor of that. I saw the parent survey data, and I would echo exactly what you're saying. We had maybe 500 responses, a little less than. And I don't know exactly how big each of those 7 schools is, but if it's somewhere between 300 and 500 families, which I think is a little on the small side, that's still somewhere between 14–20% of our families who responded. And I'm not comfortable with that number of respondents being the voice that we are attributing to our families. And I know that we didn't get the survey out until pretty recently. So I'd like for them to have more time to respond to it. With that being said, I have my own thoughts, and I've done research on this on school resource officers. And so I have my own opinions going into it. And so I'm not comfortable approving this with the lack of data and with the information that I personally brought to the table. So I agree that I would like to hear from other researchers, other experts in the area. I don't know about the August 1st deadline, but I will say I am pretty opposed to it as is. So if we miss it via the deadline, that would be my vote anyway.
Dr. Stark, Ms. Benjamin, Ms. Trujillo, did you have any preference on whether to postpone this vote?
Carmen Trujillo, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I feel the exact same way that Miss Lene Almy feels. So that's my input. Thank you.
I feel that I think we should give it a bit more time. We've done a lot of good hard work, but I think we really need to perhaps back off just a little bit and decide really exactly how it's going to be.
This is Susan Benjamin. So my question is, if we can't push the date back, if they won't let that happen, what happens?
Mrs. Benjamin, we don't know. We've asked ADE to provide guidance, and they've promised guidance to us by late this afternoon, and they haven't delivered. I did have an opportunity to speak to Chief Williams, and it appears as though she is flexible and willing to work with the district. So that's good news.
Okay, well, as long as he's flexible, then that's great. I would just hate to allow something to pass us if the community, if the 83% of what we saw in the people that we had who surveyed, both teachers and parents, came back that way for a larger number, I'd hate to lose that opportunity. But it sounds like you can, it's flexible.
Yeah, on the City of Phoenix side, Mrs. Benjamin, with ADE in terms of whether or not meeting the deadline would preclude us from receiving grant revenues for this year and the next 2 years, we don't have an answer to that yet.
Oh, okay, so you have the ADE involved in all of this too. Okay, well, I guess you'll let us know, huh? Because how much money is involved in this? $900,000
Yes, just shy of
for the seven, because the social workers, this doesn't include the two social workers?
that's a different agreement.
Okay.
I want to acknowledge that has worked very hard the last several days in trying to get as many as possible, and I appreciate that you guys sent out the surveys. I would say that because we do have potentially a very short time frame, we work very closely to figure out how we can ensure that we're getting more responses, and that we are getting researchers to come to us and present data on and the implications of having SROs, because I think that we need to hear from all stakeholders here. So I don't know if that means a work study session or a special session, another special session before August 1st. My hope is that we can push this out perhaps to September and have this discussion then, because I know that our principals and our teachers really need to focus on reopening.
Well, we need to think through a plan on this. And so to Dr. Stark's point and to many of your points in terms of slowing this down, I don't know that at this time it would be appropriate to try to rush a plan through and get something back to the governing board by August 1st. I think if we're going to do it right, if we're going to take a deep dive and have a rich conversation about this, we need to take our time planning, and in this day of COVID and in how we bring people together, this is going to be a little tricky. So we're going to need some time just to plan for this. Mm-hmm. So that would be my recommendation. If we want to hear from the community, then we need to figure out ways to digitally get the community to communicate with us and have the kind of leadership that would really draw from the community what it is that they're looking for.
I agree. I think as a first next step, we need to get guidance and a specific acknowledgement from on whether or not August 1st is a firm deadline, because if it's not, then we do have that flexibility to be comprehensive specifically for this decision. But if we must make a decision by August 1st, then we still do owe it to our community to get in those responses like ASAP, which would be unfortunate because we have other things that we're focusing on as well. And that could take the attention away from reopening schools. So I think, yeah, just providing a board update on flexibility for deciding would be really helpful as the first next step.
We'll keep chasing down ADE, Dr. Diaz. The other thing I wanted to mention was last year, the governing board approved the SRO agreement at the August 22nd meeting. So to me, that's a little confusing. If the FAQs say that August 1st is the deadline, and I don't have last year's FAQs, so maybe there was additional flexibility last year that I'm not aware of, but it just seems a little odd to me that August 1st would be the hard dig, and then there didn't seem to be a problem with the IGA last year at August 22nd. So there's some additional questions that I would like to ask in all of this too.
Okay, perfect. Well, it sounds like we're pretty much all in agreement that we should put the decision or taking action on this IGA. So can I just simply make a motion to postpone action on item C3?
I think Mrs. Almay said postpone. What did you say? Postpone consideration? I don't know that there needs to be a motion for that.
It is a motion, so I move we postpone this matter until is the sentence frame. If you'd like to use it, Dr. Diaz, you're welcome to.
Do I have a motion to consideration of item C3 until we have clarity on the deadline for making a decision?
This is Lene Almy, so moved.
Do I have a second?
I second.
I'll second.
Okay, who seconded?
I second. Well, maybe more than one of us. I don't know.
Okay, so Miss Almy did the first. I'm sorry, I was writing the change to the motion. And then Dr. Stark. Thank you.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. With that, the motion passes to postpone consideration. So we'll move on to item C4, receive and discuss items from our resolution to abolish systemic barriers to Black student success.
Thank you, Dr. Diaz, governing board members, community members. On June 30th, 2020, the board developed and approved a resolution to abolish systemic barriers to Black student success. Within this resolution are actionable items for district and school leaders. The attached PowerPoint that I also have posted, can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. This PowerPoint describes the equity work completed during the 2018-19 and 2019-20 school years and outlines the action plan for the 2021 school year. I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Wadley, who serves not only as our coordinator of social work, but also our equity action team lead. Mrs. Wadley?
Governing board president and governing board members. I want to first thank you for collaborating to create a meaningful resolution with actionable items. Specifically, those action items correlate with our equity report and our recommendations. And so I really have about 4 objectives tonight. One is to share the alignment of the resolution with our equity report, to also revisit the report and some of the recommendations, to share some of the capacity work that we've done, and to also discuss a plan moving forward. So just briefly, this slide just talks about the data that was done. We spent probably about 6 months looking at district data, both quantitative and qualitative, looking at focus groups, interviews, climate surveys. In the appendix of the report, you can see 14 different sources. And that information was used as the basis for a finding of our recommendations. It made the last 2 sections of the report. I want to say that before we move on, that the words equity, racism, anti-racism, training, implicit bias often are used interchangeably, and they're very different. They intersect, and sometimes it's hard to talk about one without the other, but they're different. And so I just wanted to put that out there because I'll be using those words, and we've been using those words in different board meetings, and I just want to make sure that everyone understands it. They're different. When we talk about trainings and the work is different, but they all intersect together. And so when we look at the equity report and the findings, all that work kind of blends together: race, inclusion, diversity, equity. It's all comes out when you start looking at data. And so our recommendations from the report, you'll hear some of those verbiage, implicit bias, and anti-racism training, things like that. Okay. So last school year, in the spring, our goal was to finalize the equity plan, because in that equity plan, we looked at the recommendations, and the plan is supposed to have the SMART goals with strategies, action items, and accountability measures. And that was really important moving forward. And so we had to postpone that due to the COVID-19 crisis, and we expect to have it completed by September of 2020. So some of the example recommendations, and these are broad, but again, they're going to be turned into SMART goals with action items, accountability measures that align to the governing board's resolution, are collaborating with the chief academic officer to develop an ongoing district professional development program addressing implicit bias, equitable instruction practices, culturally relevant curricular materials, and equitable discipline practices. And so these are some similar to some of the things that were in the resolution. Another recommendation that was in the report that needs to be turned into a SMART goal with timelines and accountability measures is to increase the diversity in Phoenix #1 administrative and teacher workforces to reflect the general and student population. And another recommendation, I would just want to say there were probably about 10 pages worth of recommendations. I'm only sharing a few just as examples of the ones that align to the action items in the resolution. And so another one is to revise the district's policies regarding discipline, treatment, and placement of students. One of the things I wanted to talk about was to share that, the district isn't starting from scratch. We have a lot of work to continue to do. But I thought it was important to just kind of revisit where we've been. And the next two slides, I'll share what we've done and then discuss some plans moving forward. And I'm just going to briefly go through them. One of the most important things about doing this work is building a solid foundation and making sure that the board and the leadership have received some training. And so it was important that the governing board, as well as cabinet and our equity action team, had a common language and definition of equity, and we really understood what equity was, because as a district, we did not. Dr. McLaughlin, can you go back to the other slide really quickly? I just thought about something I wanted to share. The information in the recommendations is based off the data. I think I said that, but I just wanted to reinforce that one more time. So all the information that the recommendations that we made were based off of the data that was in the report. And so we had a report findings section, and then we had a report recommendations. And every recommendation was based on some level of quantitative or qualitative data. Again, there were about 14 different sources that we used to collect that data. Okay. I'm sorry to backtrack. And so we first started just building the foundation with the leadership. It's important that leaders understand how deep this work is, how long-term this work is, and how much resources before they make commitments. The consultant worked with all the action team leads because it was important that equity is not a standalone. Equity should be built into everything that we do. And so the action team leads also need to think about equity through their lens. There was a group of us who went to culturally responsive teaching training. The equity action team, along with cabinet, developed an equity definition and commitment statement that was approved by the governing board. There was a district-wide culture and climate survey that we think needs to continue. In the past, we only did climate surveys at the PPIS schools, and so we did it as a district and really examined that data. There are focus groups in data analysis. There's been equity conferences that equity team members, superintendents have gone through. We had a professional development for social workers, and then the completion of the equity report was done last school year. In 2019, the summer, we decided it was important to start integrating our work from the cabinet level and board level, the principals. And so over the summer, the principals spent 2 days kind of attending a train the trainers workshop, because it was important as district leaders and principals that they were able to articulate what equity was to their staff. We also provided an introduction to equity at a governing board session. There was a 3-day culturally responsive teaching institute that coaches, IEISs, district facilitators, and classroom teachers attended. And then there was district-wide site training facilitated by school principals and directors at every school last year. We had trauma-based informed practices training that was facilitated by social workers last school year. And this school year, we had a training to build data using culture. So building a data using culture, I'm sorry about that, that our one of our WSDA consultants did with our principals. We worked this year through the principals leadership meetings to embed equity throughout our trainings and meetings. We had a consultant that worked with all of our principals to do site-based walkthroughs. I can't remember exactly when that started, but I think that was last school year, all last school year, and it's going to continue this school year to provide culturally responsive teaching coaching to principals. We were scheduled to have an implicit bias training, but that got postponed. And we also had a family engagement training that social workers and leadership attended. And so I'm saying all that, not to say that we don't have a lot of work to do, but I think we're not starting from scratch. And I would like to communicate to the governing board as action team lead. It's important that we're not just doing trainings to check the box. The work is complex, it's sensitive, it's deep-rooted, it's personal, and it requires a mindset shift. We need to be thoughtful and intentional about our plans. And I really understand the sense of urgency, and I have the same sense of urgency. And so this plan today that I'm presenting is not complete or comprehensive yet, given the compounded crisis that we're in. Some of this work is best really to be done in person if possible. If we're going to make systemic changes, everyone needs to recognize this is really long-term work. And the race and equity challenges in our country and in this district are not going to change overnight. Saying that, I've outlined some meaningful actions that I think we can start immediately given the pandemic crisis and that are reasonable right now. And so I think the priority is to finalize the equity action plan. That was due to be done in the springtime, and that report really gives us a lot of actionable items with timelines and measurability measures. Excuse me, I'm tired. And I have a baby that's crying and is ready for me to come put him to sleep. With timelines and accountability measures. I think that we need to establish a Black affinity group, and that's an easy thing that can be done before September 30th. One of the things that's important given the current racial climate, not only in our country, but in our district, is to do a similar assessment audit like we did with the equity, but specifically focus on race. Right now, I think that given the pandemic, February 2021 is a tentative date. You know, doing more surveys, doing focus groups specifically related to the racial issues in our district and the challenges that our students and family and teachers and staff may experience. Some of those things are best to be done in person. So those are all tentative. The implicit bias and anti-racist training for governing board members and cabinet. It really is important that we start with cabinet and governing board members. You all need to, as well as cabinet, understand the resources, the time and commitment that will be involved so that as we move forward and do this with the rest of our community, we have the resources to do it and we have the backing and support, and you guys understand the commitment that's involved. Identify and recruit staff from various school sites and departments. So I'm just saying identify and recruit. We probably won't get to a training before September 30th. We need to really be able to focus on the current pandemic and getting our kids back to school. But I think we can reasonably identify and recruit staff from different sites and departments to become trainers. I think that if we really are trying to do long-term work, this has to be embedded into our school buildings. We need to have people on site at schools and in departments who understand the work and provide training. Otherwise, we can't continue to hire consultants and organizations to come in for us. If we don't have the money, we need to be able to embed this in our everyday practices. Last year, we extended our contract with West Ed to continue the culturally responsive teaching and coaching and PD for principals, in which our consultant observed classrooms and teachers and gave feedback. And so that plan is to continue since it wasn't finished last year. We would like to establish a task force to explore curriculum to determine necessary to teach the Black history and diversity school libraries. This came directly from the resolution as an actionable item. And we're hoping to establish the task force by September 30th. And then develop a new policy outlining anti-racism. So this is the timeline that our assistant to superintendent provided. I think he spoke to this at one of the governing board meetings. I've been working closely with our principal at Faith North and Mrs. Wellington. She also, I think, provided a community comment today regarding some plans for Shaw Montessori. I think it's important that we together look at the needs of the community before we just submit a plan. So I'm asking the governing board to give us a little time, not that action items aren't going to start immediately, but to put a formal plan together than to rush. I think there's a lot of things that not only the district has to think about, but also that school has to think about. And so we're asking for time to put a comprehensive plan together by September 30th. So it's realistic. As you all know, we are dealing with a compound crisis. And so given that, we need to be sensitive and thoughtful about what we do. And it is important to me not just to put things up here that we could check the box for, but things that were realistic. And so as we work with Sean Montessori leadership team, I want to make sure that that work is also meaningful and relevant to her community and not just checking the box. With that being said, I think that's my last slide.
Broadly, are there any questions or comments on item C4? Oh, discuss. Okay, yeah. Are there any questions or comments?
Carmen Trujillo, I just wanted to just acknowledge and be thankful for such a well thought out and explained plan. So thank you, Miss Wadley. Miss Wally, I really appreciate all the information. Thank you.
Ms. Wadley, I also want to echo Ms. Trujillo's comments, especially knowing you have a little baby there. I don't know if you saw me having to put my son back to sleep while I was at a meeting, so I totally get it. Thank you for being up with us and sharing this information. I do have 3 questions. So the first is with regard to the audit. I know that we're focusing on race. Does that include just kind of holistically examining policies or practices that would potentially discriminate against certain students? Is that kind of like within that framework?
Yes, exactly. I think the audit would look at policies, practices of both qualitative information from families, students, and staff members about the things that are happening. There's different assessment tools to do this with that are already developed. And so we would work closely with the consultant that we already have an extended contract with to help us with that. And so they've done this before, and it's very similar. Our equity report, we did some of our data by race, but not all of it. And it wasn't, every question wasn't specific to race. Some was achievement data, some was discipline data. And so this data is specifically about race. And I think once we understand the needs that we have, we can build trainings upon that. This is just saying, let's just do an implicit bias training. Although I think we need an implicit bias training, I think we also need to look at what are some of the deeper issues that people feel and have, and how do we know they have that? And it's only by looking at some deeper data to do that. And I think some of that can be done even if we have to be virtual. And that's what I was thinking about when I created this plan, was what can be done virtually and what really should happen in person. And so hopefully we can come back and get some in-person focus groups, but there are a lot of data that we can collect virtually if needed.
Great, thank you so much. And I definitely understand the need to focus on our schools reopening and making sure our teachers and our students and families have what they need. So I think it's very appropriate to push these deadlines out just a little bit to give, so we're not rushing anything. I think this needs to be done right. My second question is with regard to, this might be a question for Dr. Diaz, with regard to just assessing our practices and our processes. Is there a plan to look at our hiring processes and really examine if the questions that we're asking help us to bring on individuals that share our same values? I understand that we can't ask we can't discriminate, right? But I know institutions like Teach for America, for instance, they are looking for a certain type of individual who believes in their mission and their vision, and they ask questions related to that mission and vision. We have a very strong resolution. So in our hiring practices, will we embed some of this language into those questions? So we, if we are asking those and a staff member decides, you know what, that actually doesn't sound like a place that really aligns with my value system, they would know from the beginning. So I don't know if that question is directed to Dr. Diaz or you, Malika.
Dr. Diaz, I mean, I have some thoughts about it, and I know there's been lots of conversation and there's been some work around that, but I'll let Dr. Diaz start first.
Yeah, Madam President, members of the board, thank you for the question. I very similar to what Malika shared earlier in terms of the work of the Equity Committee already existing in harmony with the resolution, but the resolution really giving it a supercharge. The same thing I think you're going to see with our hiring practices, not just for teachers, but for also administrators and our support staff as well. 2 years ago, we put together a couple of screening tools to measure cultural fit. One of them is it's about a 2-page document that shares achievement and demographic data from one of our zip codes to a zip code in a more suburban, affluent part of Maricopa County. And the numbers are startling in terms of the gaps you see in achievement, but also the demographic data, because we're pulling numbers from census that talk about things like average median income, average life expectancy, average, I'm sorry, the percent of folks at 25 who have a college degree. And then we ask people a couple of pointed questions about that data. 1, how does it make them feel? 2, what do they think are the root causes of that? And then 3, what is a fair expectation to put on a teacher in addressing these types of disparities? We developed that with some input from Dr. Rose over at McKeesa. And we have let principals use that at their own discretion. We've given them 4 or 5 different tools and said, you should use these, but it's really up to you. We now have the data that we need to study this year folks who are hired using that tool. And what I suspect we're going to see is folks who are using that tool do fit our culture much better. They do uphold our values of equity much better. And it's my hope that we'll be able to attach achievement data or observation data to that as well. So we have an even stronger foothold in doing the next step of, instead of saying to hiring managers, this is an option, to saying that this is a requirement. I can already see a new tool being developed, which would be us simply sharing this declaration with a candidate with a couple of key reflection questions. And to your point, what tends to happen with these tools is somebody will use it. Some of them will be bold enough to say, you know what, this just isn't the place for me. Thanks for your time. And I always say, I appreciate that. It's better we know that now than October. Or folks who will just simply not necessarily disappear in the hiring process, but suddenly have found another opportunity. And we wish them well in doing that. And so, like I said, in terms of our hiring practices, I think we're going to see that it's just a lot more momentum that goes into some things we're already doing. But I think it's also a recruitment challenge for us, not just a hiring challenge. And so we are, for the first time, collecting data on the diversity of our application pools relative to our hiring decisions. And we hope to have that data ready to share. I would hope around January. As you can imagine, our department is pretty slammed with other things that have been happening. This would have been something I hope we would have collected over the summer. But we also want to start looking into this, not, like I said, not just from a hiring standpoint, but also this recruitment. And then also from a promotion and career growth standpoint. One thing that you'll see some organizations do is do a really good job recruiting people of color, but then they don't treat. Sometimes that happens very overtly and sometimes it happens very covertly. So that goes back to the affinity groups, and it goes back to the discussion groups that Malika will help us in putting together. So we're not just looking at this through one lens of the human capital pathway. We're really looking at this through a couple of distinct different phases of your time as a staff member at Phoenix Elementary.
Perfect. That makes me so happy to hear that, you know, we're already doing work in this area and that we have a plan for moving forward. Thank you.
Mhm.
Another thing I wanted to add that we've been doing, I would say over the last couple of years, is being really intentional about who's on those interview panels, and that it's reflective of different perspectives, different cultures, different roles in our district. And so as we're hiring new people, that it's just not one group of race or one group of all teachers, but that is representative of a much broader of our population. And that's a change that I've seen over the last couple of years. I know it's not done all the time, but I would like to see in our equity plan that be done consistently, that we make sure our interview panels are representative of the roles and the culture in our district.
Thank you so much. Those are actually all my questions that I have. I appreciate that input. Is there any other discussion? Okay, so it does not look like we have any action on this. So with no further discussion, we'll move on to item D1. Are there any board reports and requests?
This is Susan Benjamin. Dr. Weeks, I wanted to thank you for sending over the onboarding plans for Mr. Quintana and Ms. Elvis. Is Mr. Quintana there tonight?
Yes, he's here.
So, Mr. Quintana, I see that one of the things you were supposed to do was to read The School Budgeting for Hard Times by William Poston. Have you been able to get through it yet, or are you still reading it?
I'm 90% the way there, and I've been beginning through it. Yes.
You're just beginning to read it?
No, I'm 90% through it, so I'm almost done.
I didn't understand. So, do you have a takeaway from it? I've read this book extensively, and I'm not in finance, so I'm always interested to hear from somebody who has the expertise you do what your takeaway was.
Well, I mean, it's on the one hand, it's oops, sorry. Excuse me a second.
Sure.
Lights went off. Yeah, it's I mean, the book is pretty prescriptive as far as the process you want to follow, and you know, very detailed as far as, you know, meetings and agendas and so forth, and so that part is pretty helpful. But I think the part that's going to be also very helpful is comparing the book to the actual process that we follow here at the district, and maybe other districts too. So that's what I'm looking forward to, is looking at what the book is suggesting that we do, and what we're doing as a district, and what other districts are doing. So it's pretty helpful, and but also it's I mean, kind of like when you go to class, or you go to class and read books, it's you get more out of the actual work that you're doing on hand, and and so that's the part I'm looking forward to, is getting involved in that process and comparing the two.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think that for me, as a non-finance person, the thing that I liked the most about it was that it linked the curriculum piece, the program goals, with measurement. So they were supposed to have measurements, and then there were outcomes, and then that was linked to the finance. So the question always was, how much bang do we get for our bucks? And I was like, oh yeah, that makes complete sense to me. And I know, and based on the what can be improved, that was one of the things that came forward, was the quantitative data that supports the delivery needs to be focused on for the future, because it's really been, started the process a couple of years ago, but that piece is still weak, or still lacking, I guess, is to that. Is part of all of that. So Dr. Weeks, are you going to get training, or what else are you going to do? Because you've got a COO, 3 directors, 2 coordinators, and I believe Dr. Brown didn't have the training either. So that'd be 4 directors. What are you planning to do to support them in this?
Well, Mrs. Benjamin, the first thing we're going to do is focus on reopening schools, as Dr. Diaz mentioned, and then who is available to provide the training, whether Bill's still available or one of his folks is still available. When we have time and when we can schedule in some training, we would like to do that. I want to work with Mr. Quintana here and develop more of a long-term plan. We also have to decide how much of performance-based budgeting we want to do in this COVID year. And so how much of this process, we know we need to build a budget for next year, but how much of this process are we going to use this year? So I've got some questions, Mrs. Benjamin, and I'll be sitting down with Mr. Quintana and some others to kind of reflect on that, and then we can come back to the governing board with a little bit more of a concrete plan on how we're going to proceed this year.
And I would say that probably Dr. Poston probably could give you some insight into that, because I think it's important that you continue on and look at how much bang are we getting for our buck. So the other thing I just wanted to say is that things that were to be improved on, that this is a board, this is from the board perspective, was that we were not given presentations on all of the packages, but just the big packages. And I'm telling this to Mr. Quintana mostly, so he knows. And they should be over a period of time, but we had them during 4 or 5 during one meeting and 4 and 5 during a second meeting. And then we were asked to rank that night. And in fact, we only ranked once and never discussed it. And we left HR off, so they didn't even exist. It wasn't pretty. And it was late. And that was one of the reasons why I think we started ranking at 9:30. And so I hope in the future that they'll be more spread out and people will have the opportunity to ask their questions and keep their notebook, and then have the time to go through those rankings several times as a board member. And I have one request. My request is, and this is for you, Dr. Weeks, is that we have a policy for financial management concerning performance-based budgeting. We've done it for 2 years, and I believe if you look in the book, this book, there are 2 different policies on page 69 and 70. So I'm looking for a time frame that hopefully the first reading could come in September and late September, and the final one come in December, that we see that it's actually embedded in our policy.
We're happy to take a look at that, Mrs. Benjamin.
Well, I'm making that request. So can Mr. Lind, is that possible that you would be able to bring that forward?
Yes, that timeline seems reasonable.
Okay.
I'll get my copy of the book, and it's at my desk at my office, but I'll get the book and we'll take a look at it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there any additional board reports or requests?
I have one more comment, and I appreciate, this is for Dr. McLaughlin, the information from the special education department. I am pleased to see they're going to use Common Sense Parenting. I'm a trainer for Common Sense Parenting. It's a great program. I actually trained with parents of some of my students. It was quite powerful. So it has a great outcome. There's also a blog from the Boys Town Educational, from the group, and you can go on the blog and maybe they've already done this, and see all kinds of opportunities for how to engage the kids when they're learning virtually. So I was very pleased to see that, because it's a great program. I will, just for the record, say that I was very disappointed in the response about whether or not, if a speech language pathologist or a special ed teacher or related service person was asked to go into a home to provide FAPE, that there would be no COVID pay for them because it's something that no one else would be doing. And I'm very disappointed in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Benjamin. Do we have any additional board reports or requests?
This is Carmen Trujillo. I was thinking of this until trying to figure out what the request was regarding the performance-based budgeting, but I would like to request how the board came to choose performance-based budgeting. What was in place before? So if that information is available somewhere or where I might be able to find it, that would be my request.
Mr. Hio, the performance-based budgeting came from the curriculum audit. It's in the curriculum audit.
So that was a recommendation or a choice that the old board made?
That was it was just part of the curriculum audit. It was their recommendations through the curriculum audit. So we were following, we were following the curriculum audit. It wasn't, and so that's how we started using it. Because it provided, it was collaborative, there was equity pieces to it. It was transparent. There's a lot of pieces to it, and that's what the audit supported. And it linked what I was saying. It linked the actual curriculum to the finances, so they were connected. And so, and that was an important piece in terms of making the school district strong.
Additionally, Ms. Trujillo, we're happy to provide information on what was done before performance-based budgeting.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dr. Weeks.
I just want to reiterate an earlier request that we get an update on the decision for when we have to officially approve or not approve the agreement between the City of Phoenix and Phoenix Elementary. So if we could get that as soon as possible. I know that you have that out to AD right now. That's all my request. Okay, so hearing no additional reports or requests, I'll move on to item D2. Are there any future agenda items? I have several, but I just want to make that blanket statement. I'm not going to share them today just because I know that we do have a pressing priority in reopening the schools. But in a few meetings, I will share what those are, and I think they might take up a little bit of time, but just wanted to put that on your radar that I will share those pretty soon.
Okay, well, we appreciate you holding off on that so we can get schools reopened. I would just like to make a comment to the board on something Ms. Wadley said tonight, and that is, we heard her say several times, checking the box. And this is not a place that we want to go to. We do not want to be a district that checks the box. We want to be thorough, we want to be intentional, we want to be purposeful in our planning, and that often takes a much longer period of time. And when you add collaboration into that, it makes for a very powerful plan. So I appreciate the board's support as we move forward with this idea that checking the box is not something that we want to do. We really want to do a quality work for providing the very best for our students and for our staff and community. So I just want to thank the board for that commitment.
So can someone tell me what Dr. Weeks just said?
Ms. Benjamin, Dr. Weeks was thanking us for working with Ms. Wadley and the rest of our staff to really allow the time needed to be thoughtful and intentional in implementing a lot of these requests, specifically, you know, when it comes to our racial and equity plan. So just knowing that we don't want to check the box on things, we want to really be intentional and collaborative on those.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are there any additional future agenda items? Okay, hearing none, the meeting is adjourned at 8:55 p.m.
Thanks, everybody.